All right, so I'm gonna do a little bit of a extension on last night's talking point with Chris Lytle. So we're gonna be doing this with Sean Wheelock of Bare Knuckle Fighting and Mike Davis, the MMA detective from the MMA Conspiracy Hour. So I'm just gonna bring these. Sean.
How are you, Todd?
Good. It's good to have you back, man. I thought it'd be great to have you on for this discussion.
Thank you. Always nice to talk to you, man. I appreciate all the work that you do. I really appreciate the coverage you do for Bare Knuckle.
Yeah, and I thought this signing was really interesting. So I think Chris Lytle's actually going to join us. So
excellent.
Yeah. Just got to get Mike in here. Sorry, it's going to take me just a moment. Okay.
You're absolutely fine.
Maybe we can talk a little bit about, while we're bringing them on. Mike, I just sent you an invite about this Buckhouse signing. What do you know? I mean, in the position you're in, what do you know about how this came to pass?
Is this for me or for Mike?
For you.
So this is all because of Nick Chapman, who has worked with David Feldman to create BKFC Thailand. And Buakaw is one of the most famous Muay Thai fighters in the world. He's also one of the most famous athletes in all of Thailand. Almost legendary status. You can probably remove the word almost legendary status there. He's a huge name. So what Nick Chapman has done with BKFC Thailand, which Chris Lytle and I last commentated in May for his next show, which is coming up in 2 months in September, Buakaw is now signing. I mean, there have been some phenomenal fighters on that card. Siri Mongkong Lanthuam, who's a former 3-division legitimate major organization boxing world champion, has fought twice in BKFC. Hello, Mike Davis. How are you?
What's up, Sean Wheelock?
In BKFC Thailand. A number of fighters who I knew from World Lightweight Championship when I commentated that promotion, including the French female fighter Souleymane Frady. So it's just a matter of BKFC expanding their brand in Asia, in Thailand, and through Nick Chapman using BKFC Thailand to get a lot of outstanding fighters in that region.
I know people have like the lazy argument, oh, they just paid him money, but how do you think they pitched him a little bit?
I have no idea. I'd purely be speculating. I have no idea, Todd, of the contracts, what he's getting paid to pitch. What's not speculation is how hot BKFC is worldwide. The 2 shows they've done in Thailand where they fought Pattaya had huge crowds. I know they got a lot of coverage in the country and in Thailand, as well as in the Asian region and in the fight press. So I imagine it was not that tough of a negotiation. Lion Fight just had a show. I used to commentate for them. They've certainly not done as many shows as they did. Unfortunately, with all the civil unrest and strife and military intervention in the government in Myanmar, without getting too political, unfortunately, World Lightweight Championship is best case scenario on hold, worst case scenario. I don't know if they're coming back or not. So there aren't nearly as many opportunities as there were for fighters. So something like this, while it's not Muay Thai or Letway, it's an emerging combat sport. I would say it's the fastest growing combat sports promotion in the world in BKFC. So you're going to attract fighters. I imagine getting Buakaw is probably not that different from getting someone like Chad Mendes.
My belief is that the expansion of BKFC and the elements that are coming into play, it's just, David Feldman's listening to the right people. Like if you look at the other sports organizations, like UFC in particular, there's a lot of chaos there right now, particularly with contracts. And if you look at the press releases on the BKFC side, it's like Felice Herring, I couldn't afford to stay retired. They paid me 3 times my UFC contract. I mean, Feldman's killing it right now. He's really grown into that role.
Yeah, you know, Todd, I think so much about Art Davie, you know, who, as you and Mike both know, and I think a lot of people who know me know, is basically like my later in life second father. And for UFC 1, Art could not find fighters, so much to the point that he was actually buying ads in magazines like Inside Karate and Inside Kung Fu to get fighters. That was how desperate he was. It never got to that for David Feldman, but I can tell you, because I recommended a number of fighters for BKFC 1, he wasn't having an easy time. He was getting a lot more no's than he was getting yeses. The same path as Art Davie, basically a quarter century earlier. Now, 4 years later, much like for Art Davie 4 years later, it's completely the polar opposite. Now it's so many fighters are inundating Nate Shook, our great matchmaker, Dave Feldman, his son Dave Feldman Jr., who's our head of operation, wanting to fight. And that's everybody from world-class fighters like a Buakaw or a Felice Herrig to people coming through open tryouts, to mid-level fighters, to young fighters, 18, 19-year-olds, all types of veterans, boxers, kickboxers, Letway, Muay Thai, MMA, wanting to come to bare knuckle. Because, Mike, as you said, and I firmly believe it, you know, this is the hot promotion right now. BKFC, in my opinion, is doing everything right at this moment.
Not only are they doing everything right, they're staying out, like, they're not doing it with controversy. I mean, they're doing it the right way. I'm not going to see keeping their head down, because they're not. When you get MVP versus Mike Perry at the O2 or at the Wembley, like, that's not, you know, keeping your head down and making silent moves. They're making big moves, doing the right thing without, like, sticking their neck out to where people can kind of take pot shots at them. Like, they said they were going to Wembley. That's a huge place to fill. And I've got friends in Europe just telling me, man, it's going to be empty. It's going to be empty. They signed one fight, and everyone's going, oh, I'm definitely going to that. It's different. Like, his approach and his setup of BKFC with the app. I mean, Sean, it's $4.99 a month. You refer to it as the best price in combat sports. Like, he didn't get greedy. No one's ripping off BKFC because it's cheap enough to buy.
Right.
I think he's showing he's a multi-generational promoter, and he's showing the people that have been around for a while how this new generation is supposed to get down or watch fights. He's doing everything right, man.
Yeah.
You know, Mike, can you kind of pitch on your how Dave Feldman is kind of in the driver's seat when it comes to, you know, because I thought that was interesting. I'd like
So yesterday, I mean, Todd and I, we attempted to do one of these, and it kind of, you know, got messed up. But if you look at Feldman and his moves, like, as he grows, as the tree grows, you got to make sure the roots are still watered. You've got a guy in Thailand, and usually, like, when you start those little satellite areas, those people are begging for attention. You know, they need, because, you know, the home base is here in the United States. They're begging for attention. So what does he do? He gets the Michael Jordan of Thailand to sign on. Like, I firmly believe, by the way he's running this company, let's say normally it would take 4 or 5 years to get to a finish line. What he's doing is going to cut that, like, in half. It's just he's doing all the right things. He's in the driver's seat. Look where Dana White's at. He hasn't been at the last 2 UFCs. Is it contract issues? Usman, Ngannou, Diaz, McGregor, the list goes on and on. You know, and meanwhile, you don't hear any of that on the BKFC side. It's crazy. It's UFC 1. That's what this is.
What do you think about that, Sean?
I as you guys can see, there's my UFC 1 poster, and there's my BKFC 1 poster as I'm sitting in my home office in my home studio in Kansas City. I've been with David Feldman since this show, June 2nd, 2018, BKFC 1, actually 2 years before. So this month, 2016, David Feldman signed me as a consultant. So that's how long I've been with him. You're not going to meet a bigger advocate or believer, advocate of or believer in David Feldman than me. I liked him the moment that we first talked. I bought into his vision. I was already someone who was in love with bare knuckle fighting, understanding fighters like John Heenan and Tom Sayers, understanding the history, the Broughton rules, just being basically a gigantic bare knuckle nerd, as I'm a gigantic fight nerd and fight sports history nerd. So David Feldman had me in our first conversation. I saw his passion. I saw his vision. it reminded me when Bjorn Rebney started pitching me when I was at M1 in the fall of 2009 about this thing he was going to launch called Bellator. David Feldman has surpassed Bjorn Rebney, and I say that with all due affection to Bjorn Rebney, still a great friend of mine. But David Feldman has gone to the next level of this.
Yes.
The biggest bare knuckle organization in the world. It's still rapidly growing. The fact that Paige Van Zant's going to fight on our London card and she's not going to main event speaks volumes. When with apologies to fighters such as Juliana Pena, and Chris Cyborg, Kayla Harrison. But for me, Paige Van Zant is the most popular, most relevant female fighter across all combat sports. And she's co-main eventing our show, shows you just how far this promotion has come. When David Feldman was being told no a lot more than he was being told yes when he was reaching out. It's an option. And I think all of us who care about this industry, we want to see fighters have options. I'm the biggest UFC fan in the world. I never have anything bad to say about the UFC. I have nothing bad to say about Dana White. I think the UFC is spectacular. I thought they were spectacular when I commentated for Bellator. I think they're a great organization. Fans can always find fault. Fighters can always find fault, and fair enough. But the UFC, what they've taken on and what they've continued to do 29 years after UFC 1 is phenomenal. With that said, there's space in the combat sports universe for other things. And if you look at the MMA landscape, I would posit that Bellator is not nearly as close to the UFC as they were, say, 2013, 2014. And I'm not just saying that because I was there at the time. I look at the PFL numbers. I think they're growing incrementally, but they have a tough time getting 300,000 viewers for their biggest cards on ESPN, which is not a great number. I know One Championship has a lot of relevancy in Asia. I don't believe they have anywhere close to that level of relevancy in this country. Combate Americas, Combate Global now, I don't think that they have the relevancy here that maybe they do in some Latin American countries. So the UFC is still dominant. But then if you step outside of that, if you look at other combat sports, there is BKFC. And what I think is great about it is you don't have to be one or the other. You don't have to choose sides. You can be a massive UFC fan as I am and be a massive BKFC fan. You can love boxing. You can watch every Top Rank show and every PBC. You can watch Muay Thai. You can be a combat sports fan and still watch. No one is cannibalizing anybody's audience, especially in this digital age and with VOD and pay-per-view and streaming. You can watch multiple shows at once. You can time shift. You can delay. You can be a fan of everything. And ultimately, for me, what it comes down to as an industry guy, you're giving great opportunities to fighters. You're giving them an opportunity to go and earn elsewhere. Someone like Felice Herrig, and I read an interview with Felice today. I've known Felice. She was on the third ever Bellator that I did, Mike, in your city in Chicago. Yeah. And when we played the Chicago Theater in, I believe, April of 2010, Felice Herrig was on that card. And then the interview I read today, she said, I never loved MMA. And she loved striking. She came from kickboxing.
She comes from a Muay Thai background. Yeah.
Right. And for her not only to be able to maybe make more money than she's ever made in her life, but to pursue a sport where she feels that this is her true passion or true love, I think that's brilliant. So, again, sometimes people look at success as like a pie in a refrigerator. If I get a piece, there's less for you. I don't view success that way. I think success can be spread out. And if BKFC has great success, which I believe that we're having and continue to have more and more every show, doesn't mean there's less success for anybody else. If anything, I think it makes it more successful for everybody else.
Sean, you mentioned a bunch of other organizations, and I think what differentiates the BKFC from like the PFL, from Bellator, even the UFC, is you got to look at who the guy in charge surrounds himself with and what is their intention. Like, if they have a manager of fighters being the lead liaison, like the PFL, Ali, if he's managing guys and he's got an organization, what's his intent? If you look at like yourself and the other people that Feldman surrounded himself with, you guys just want to see the sport advance itself, and that's why you guys are growing at leaps and bounds as compared to the other combat sport competitors. I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Mike. And, you know, I'm not going to, I know Ali Abdel-Aziz really well. I have a great relationship with him.
Yeah.
I'm never going to say anything on any other organization or criticize. I'll talk about BKFC, and I'll say this, that myself, Chris Lytle, Dave Feldman, his son Dave Jr., Nate Shook, our matchmaker, to the guys who build the ring, who drive the trucks, Jonathan Evans, our producer, Jeff Houston, our ring announcer, Brian Sosha, we all care deeply about it. No one at BKFC is there just because it's a gig. I can tell you when I was at Bellator, it started this way, and I would say by about the fourth year, I was there 5.5 years, there were people and it was just a gig, and that drove me crazy. I know it drove Bjorn Rebney crazy. We don't have that at BKFC.
No.
The turnover from BKFC 1 to now is virtually none. All the way down, I'm telling you, to the people who set up the ring, it's the same guys. Dave Feldman always says that his father taught him you can't be anything less than 100% loyal. There's no such thing as 99% loyal. And that's true. And loyalty is absolutely two-way traffic. And the loyalty that David Feldman has shown all of us who work for him, and that we've shown not just to David Feldman, but to the organization and to the sport, I think that's a big reason why it's advancing. Everybody that you see who's working for BKFC, be it a fighter or a ring builder, a truck driver, a camera person, we all care deeply about it, and we don't want to be anywhere else. And what's so cool is you get that from the fighters as well, how important it is to them, how this isn't just, well, I'm an MMA guy, but I thought I had an opportunity to make some money. This is a passion for them. In our fighter meetings, Chris Lytle and myself, we're told more and more, you know, I was a kickboxer, I was an MMA fighter, I was a college wrestler, but this is what I love, bare knuckle fighting. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to shape my combat sports future.
Yeah, that's excellent. It's fun.
I glossed over something. You mentioned it, but I thought it was something interesting, which was you talked about the affordability of the app, you know, which is something Bjorn did. Bellator was basically free. You know, he had it on same night of the week. It was free. Yeah. Wasn't going toward pay-per-view. It eventually got there. But that wasn't
against Bjorn's will. That wasn't.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Bjorn lasted one show after our pay-per-view. It wasn't his choice.
But I mean, how important is that to have something that's kind of, you know, affordable in a market where that's not necessarily the norm?
Yeah, Todd, I think that's a great question. I love being on with you and Mike. You guys are smart guys. You guys ask me good stuff. The fact that in this era, rights fees are largely disappearing for combat sports. You're getting time buys, you're getting barter deals or streaming deals or online pay-per-views. But the traditional model of we're going to pay your promotion X, that's really starting to disappear. And early on, BKFC, when we were just pay-per-view, saw the opening digitally. And we can have this app, we can have a lot of content, and we can make this affordable. As you say, $4.99 a month. We can make this affordable. So we're not going to be an organization that comes to you once every 6 or 8 weeks and we try to soak you for $50 or $70 or $99. We're going to make it affordable. It's got to be accessible. You know, I grew up as a huge boxing and pro wrestling fan as a kid in the 80s because I could watch that. We had cable, we had HBO, so I could watch Georgia Championship Wrestling on the Superstation WTBS. I could watch WWF then on USA Network. I could watch my boxing on USA and on HBO. I'm the only child of a single mom. We didn't have a lot of money. My mom is a retired public school art teacher. So while she would indulge occasionally on pay-per-views, like for this one, $14.95 on November 12th, 1993, we just didn't have the financial means that my mom could have bought me 25 pay-per-views a year at $49.95. That was unrealistic. But I was able to see those and really hone my love and my passion for combat sports. This is kind of the next generation of that if you love BKFC, you might not be in a financial position. Maybe you were a kid like me then, or maybe you're just a working person like I am, like we all are, saying, I can't afford to pay this much money all the time, but I can afford $4.99, and this is a really good deal, and I see the product. Yeah, you know, in the last rights negotiation, there was an interesting theory floating around sports media, which never really got publicized, but I found it fascinating, that if the UFC would have ended their pay-per-views and gone all in with a network, that their rights fees would have gone up exponentially, and they probably would have driven viewers. The NFL had a chance to do that in the 80s. The NFL was getting pitched really hard by pay-per-view companies to move the Super Bowl to pay-per-view, which you can imagine the billions of dollars of revenue. But if they did that at the expense of what? These multi-billion-dollar TV contracts they get now. So there's always that argument of, is it accessibility versus price? Are you trying to make a lot of money on a handful of pay-per-views, or are you trying to make a little bit of money spreading out your product, knowing that it's going to grow? I'm a big believer that a combat sport promotion can only grow if people are able to see it. And if you're continually putting it behind a paywall, it's tough. I love boxing. I commentate boxing. I commentated a boxing show last week on Fight TV out of Wichita, Kansas. I'm old enough that I was already a hardcore boxing fan before UFC 1. But it would be difficult for the 12-year-old version of me to be a boxing fan now, because there's just not a ton of boxing on there. HBO's out of it, you know. Showtime doesn't have the level of cards they once did, because their great cards are all pay-per-view. And there's some decent top-ranked cards on ESPN, but, you know, DAZN costs money. Those pay-per-views cost money. It would be tough to be a boxing fan. UFC has made it relatively easy, and I think BKFC has made it very, very easy to be a fan of their promotions.
What do you think the odds of Tyson Fury showing up in London at the London event?
You know, I have no idea, but it would not surprise me, because right now we're a combat sport that Shaquille O'Neal randomly shows up, and The Undertaker randomly shows up, and Riddick Bowe randomly shows up. It would not surprise me at all. You guys know how momentum builds. If it gets out that a few celebrities are going, then more celebrities want to go. But it's funny, though, when I'm commentating, man, I have tunnel vision. I'm usually like an hour after the show. Hey, Riddick Bowe was here. Oh, man, I'd love to have met him. Where was he? He sat 4 feet behind you, Sean. I'm sorry. I was paying attention to the fights.
I got to ask you about MVP, Sean. I mean, me and Mike talked about it, and maybe we'll talk about some more. But is this, in your opinion, is it a one-time thing, or do you think?
I'll tell you, I know my grappling partner, we were talking about this, and he was asking about Michael. So I've known Michael Venom Page since he was an undercard fighter. I believe it was 2012 when he made his Bellator debut, and I believe it was Lewiston, Maine on his first fight. I can tell you Bjorn read me and did not quite know what to do with him, because he saw this great style, this great personality, but Bjorn, I think, was concerned about matchmaking, and was he limited? Could he get taken down? Could a wrestler get him? You know, Page has worked really hard to be a complete mixed martial artist, and he has really evolved. But he was a solid 3.5 years in on his Bellator run before he really moved out of the mid-card and even the undercard status. So he's someone I've known for close to 10 years, who I like a lot. My buddy David Rickles was telling me about their fight, just about how elusive he was, how hard that he hit. I've commentated a number of Michael Venom Page fights. I thought always this is a guy who would be perfect for bare knuckle. I don't know how his contract was written. I know from what I read that he was able to do boxing because he's already done a boxing. And, you know, even the UFC guys get frustrated. They only get to fight 2 and 3 times a year. And in Bellator, while it has a much smaller roster, they're doing roughly 50% of the shows. So, you know, these are athletes in their athletic prime who have this incredible competitive spirit, and maybe they want to do something more than just fight once or twice at most a year. So I imagine that's where Michael Venom Page came from. It's about the money for everybody, let's be frank, but it's not just about the money. And knowing Michael Venom Page fairly well as I do, although I haven't talked to him in a while, is that I think a lot of it's that competitive spirit. It's testing himself. It's a new challenge. It's pushing himself. How will I do against this? This is the most intriguing matchup for me. Had I not commentated Mike Perry versus Michael Seals in Triad, I would have told you, well, I wouldn't have told you because I don't really say that stuff out loud, but I would have thought to myself, Michael Venom Page probably has the advantage based on his length and his timing. But Michael Seals, the 29-3 pro boxer who Mike Perry beat in Triad, similar rules to bare knuckle, not exactly, but similar rules. That the way he was able to solve distance, it's not an apples to apples comparison. Michael Seals isn't Michael Venom Page and vice versa. But what that fight showed me is that Mike Perry is able to work to the inside against a longer, more skillful striker and win on the inside where his skill set takes over. And I think Mike Perry, who I'm a big fan of as a person as well, really genuinely like Mike Perry. I got to know him. I first commentated him in Chael Sonnen's old Submission Underground. And I'm thinking, okay, what type of guy is this going to be? And I thought he was the coolest guy there. I really genuinely like him. I think he's a fantastic guy. I think he's the first one to tell you that had he stayed outside against Michael Seals, he probably would have lost. If he stays outside against Michael Venom Page, he's probably going to lose. Mike Perry's a really smart fighter, and Michael Venom Page is a really smart fighter. Lila and I always talk about range fights. Man, this is the quintessential range fight. In terms of, Todd, what you're asking me contractually, man, I have no idea. I don't know how these contracts are written. I don't know where Mike. I'll talk to Michael Page in London. I don't know the status of his contract, if it's something he can do both, if he wants to shift away from Bellator. I have no idea. I have no idea on that. What I do know is that I'm really happy that we got him, because this might be the best fight in the history of the promotion.
Do you think that there's going to be some more crossover fighters coming from Bellator, or maybe a healthy working relationship?
It's a great question. You know, that's really all how contracts are written. Bro, I have no idea. I really don't know. This is the first active Bellator fighter who's been able to fight for our promotion. And I know the precedent with Michael Venom Page was set because he had that boxing match last year. And I remember reading at the time he wanted to do boxing, and they wrote that in. You know, UFC contracts outside of Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather Jr., there's no striking sports. You know, there are rights of refusal, like the UFC allowed Chad Mendes because of his contract status. But, you know, we certainly haven't seen the Michael Venom Page equivalent. Just throwing out a name like someone like Justin Gaethje. It would be difficult to see the UFC saying for Justin Gaethje, here's a one-fight pass, go fight in BKFC and come back. I don't know. You know, every contract is individualized, depends on the value of the fighter, depends on who their manager is, their agent, how it's written. I have no idea. I hope so. Again, with Bellator, I think they do 20 shows a year, 22, something like that, which means a lot of guys are fighting once or twice at most. It'd be fantastic. I mean, how great would it be to see Austin Vanderford come in? I would love to see that. I'm not tampering on anybody's contracts, but I would love to see people like, Patricio and Patricky Frede, the Pitbull brothers, come in. Yeah. That would be amazing. Wow. To see Czech Congo come in would be amazing. But I just don't know on the contracts. This might be a one-off, or this might be a precedent center. I would purely be guessing, and I don't know.
Yeah, you had a theory that this was kind of a loophole where Bellator's like, we don't mind if you go box, but we didn't mean for you to do this.
Well, yeah, it's one of two things that are going to take place. Either a healthy working relationship, which, I mean, everybody here would hope for, or Bellator is going to change their contract.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true. I mean, if you think from Bellator's perspective, right? And again,
going to help them,
guys. They got rid of me in this month, 2015. So I've not been there in a long time. It's impossible for me to think that I've been gone longer from Bellator than I worked there. And it's funny, I still meet people who think I commentate for Bellator, which I don't think they've been paying that close attention to Bellator or the broadcast. No, that's my good friend Big John McCarthy now on the broadcast. But so I don't know the inner workings. The vast majority of friends I had who were fighters there are gone. People like Joe Warren and Ben Askren and Michael Chandler, David Rickles, long gone from that promotion. I still have friends who fight there, Austin Vanderford certainly being one of them. Outside of John McCarthy, I really don't talk to anybody. Jimmy Smith is obviously long gone there. So I don't really have relationships at Bellator outside of a handful of fighters who were there. So I would look at their perspective. Maybe they're thinking, all right, We just had Michael Venom Page. We're going to fight him twice a year. He just came off that fight against Logan Storley. We're going to probably fight him at the end of the year. We'll do another big show in the UK. And again, this is just me speculating. So he wants to fight. He's one of our biggest stars. Let's make him happy. Let's make him happy. He can earn some money. It's kind of a win-win for him. If he wins, he's completely rehabilitated himself off of that Logan Storley fight, which it seems like Scott Coker felt that he won and Page felt that he won. And if he loses, well, he stepped out of his comfort zone. So while I don't believe in no-lose situations in life, it's not as though he lost in MMA. And if he loses, he's going to lose to an equal world-class fighter. It could just be a chance to placate. It could have been that they were just stuck contractually and they didn't want to fight it out in court. They said, fine. But like you said, Mike, we're going to close that loophole. Again, I don't know. This is not my Bellator. This is not Bjorn Rebney Bellator, so I really don't know.
But you did say there's some people from that era in Bare Knuckle FC. Do you think there's
loads
Bjorn Rebney Bellator kind of influence in the?
I did a photo, and I think it was like Josh Burns, Mike Richmond, Ronnie Rogers. Trying to think who else. Was it Jeremiah Riggs may have been in the photo. And we did a photo, and we did it like intentionally cheesy looking, and I sent it to Bjorn Rebney. I was like, hey, it's the Bellator reunion. But it's so much fun for me when I see people. Some people I've stayed in contact with, like David Rickles, but then other people who I got to be, I think, pretty close friends with, and just life happens and you're fighting different promotions. Someone like Mike Richmond, who I really, really like. And I hadn't seen or spoken to Mike in 3 years. And to rekindle that friendship is fantastic. Jeremiah Riggs is another. I adore Jeremiah Riggs, and I was so happy to see him coming back from Bellator. There have been so many of those Bellator guys, and I'll say, oh, man, I commentated you in this fight and this fight, and we'll talk about that. That's so much fun for me as a commentator, and it's not just that. It's when I'll have a guy will say, hey, I commentated you in Lion Fight. I commentated you in Submission Underground. Oh, I had you in FAC. I had you here. And it's really fun for me to have people in different promotions. It's been cool with Bellator. The part B of that with BKFC, guys who I have idolized as fighters, who I never had a chance to commentate because I've never commentated for the UFC. I've had a chance to commentate in BKFC. So that'd be people like Chris Lytle, Chris Lieben, getting to commentate Chad Mendez. I'm trying to think. I commentated Gabriel Gonzaga in grappling and Submission Underground, but to commentate him in a striking sport, Antonio Silva. Amazing. So cool that I've had a chance to commentate these UFC guys who I would never have had the chance to commentate otherwise. That's been a lot of fun for me as well. It's cool, the pool of people that BKFC is bringing in, because you think about the homegrown stars, people like Taylor Starling, people like Jared Grant, people like Reggie Barnett. Who's that, Mike?
Arnold Adams.
Arnold Adams, absolutely. And then you have that, and then you have people who were legitimate. Oh, Lorenzo Hunt would be another one of those names.
Lorenzo Hunt,
and
for sure.
Then you have people who've reached the pinnacle, which I consider to be in MMA. I consider that to be the UFC, and they've come to BKFC.
Oh, that's the one I think.
Who's that? I'm sorry, Todd.
Cuban Assassin.
Gustavo Trujillo.
Yeah.
Gustavo Trujillo was another. He fought once in Bellator. It was long after I was gone, and he got submitted. But he is a dangerous man. What a cool guy too. What a warm person. He's always the first guy to come up to me at press conferences. I'll always spot him in the crowd. He's just such a warm, nice guy. I think we have an industry, just in combat sports in general, of really good people. And BKFC, it's such a fun show. Mike, I know you know this. Todd Lytle may have told you this too. He says it's a lot like the early UFCs, 100%. The camaraderie, where people don't just go to their own parties. There's always a little mini party. Here's something for the fans. If you want to meet the fighters, find out our hotel, and then come back to our hotel about 1 a.m. and everyone is sitting in the hotel lobby having a cocktail. Opponents are sitting there talking about their fight going over. There's never any tough guy antics. There's never any animosity. It's almost like we're all on the same team, and now we're sitting together kind of going over the night. It's an amazing experience. Lytle said that's what he had in the UFC in the early years of his run, and it was gone by the end of his run.
You and Chris.
Last night, I'll just say this quickly. Lytle said, look, you get your body beat up so much doing this MMA stuff in the gym. To do just this and, a little clinching too, it's a relief for a lot of these guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love when Chris says that, and by no means is he saying this is an easy sport. What Chris is saying is when he had his 3 fights, he would have finished his day's training. He said, I felt like I was a quarter of the way through. Well, when is wrestling practice? When do I have to do Muay Thai? When am I doing my clinch drills? When am I playing with my bottom game jiu-jitsu? That as fighters get to a certain stage, and I don't say age because age is really when you start the punishment on your body. You can be a shot fighter at 26 or you can be relevant at 46. It just depends on that. So it's not a certain age, but a certain stage. But when fighters get to a certain stage in their body, the recovery process is just different. So if you can go into the gym and you can just do hard sparring and focus just on your hands for 90 minutes, as opposed to having to do a 6-hour training day where you're doing wrestling and shoots and being thrown and working off the bottom and all this grinding cage work, that's different on your body. And Chris said that's what appealed to him to come back. And again, we have Jared Grant, who's 19-year-old on the roster. And we look at someone like Alan Belcher at 38, which is a relatively young age because he got out of the UFC at 32. We have fighters well into their 40s. So it's not just that it has to be for older fighters, but it's just different on your body. It's a different level of training because you really can just focus on your hands. You have to focus on your clinch, there's no doubt, but you're not going to jiu-jitsu practice. You're not going to Muay Thai practice. You're not going to wrestling practice at your MMA gym. You're working on your hands and maybe your clinch.
Todd, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Do you have anything you want to sign up?
No, Sean, thank you so much for joining us, man. Greatly appreciated. And what you and Chris do in that broadcast booth is it's something that's going to be around forever, man. It's fantastic.
I appreciate it very much. Mike, you're a great friend. Todd, you always look out for me. I appreciate both of you guys. And Mike, I might see you in Florida at the next one. Todd, I'll definitely see you down the road.
All right.
Take care.
Take care, guys.
Thanks for having me. See you guys.
Yep.